At the final divorce session, my ex-wife's attorney giggled, "Enjoy your new existence, you'll need a miracle." I didn't sleep the night before. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, watching it spin and spin until it became a blur. I turned the fan on even though it was January. Something about the motion gave me the illusion that time was still moving, that I was still part of something kinetic, not just stuck in this static purgatory of endings. Every few hours, I'd glance at my phone, not because I was expecting anything from her, God no, but because the silence had become so loud it felt like pressure on my chest, and I needed to prove to myself that the world still existed outside that apartment. The morning of the final hearing was gray, not dramatically stormy, just flat and colorless, a film over everything. The kind of day where nothing feels sharp. I poured coffee into a chipped mug that still had both our names on it, a plus J with a stupid heart in the middle, and I stared at the fatting Sharpie like it was mocking me. I should have thrown it out months ago, but I didn't. I kept telling myself I'd do it later when I was ready. As if there was some version of me that would ever be ready to erase the evidence that once I was loved, or thought I was. I dressed in silence. Charcoal slacks, button-down shirt, the clothes I wore to job interviews or to funerals. I guess this was both. My hands trembled when I did the buttons, and I had to sit down halfway through, elbows on my knees, face in my hands, just breathing, just trying to hold onto something. The courthouse was cold in that institutional way, a chill in the bones, not just in the skin. The walls were painted a sort of yellow beige that no one in the history of paint had ever chosen on purpose. It was a color meant to erase you. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above, and I remember the security guard's nod, impersonal but not unkind, as I passed through the metal detector. I felt like I should have been wearing a scarlet letter. Like the people around me could see it all over me, this failure, this grief. I got there before her. Sat on the bench outside the courtroom, hands folded like I was at a church pew. I kept staring at the clock. The second hand ticked louder than it should have. I tried to focus on my breathing. In out, I kept telling myself it was just paperwork, just a formality. We'd already been apart for nearly a year. We barely spoke. When we did, it was transactional, the lease, the car, the dog we couldn't agree on. I let her keep Sadie. That was the first time I cried after she left, and I did it alone in the bathroom with the door locked, as if someone might walk in and see me collapsing. When she arrived, I felt her presence before I saw her, a subtle shift in the air. I looked up and there she was, walking down the hall like a stranger. She wore that navy coat I bought her 2 Christmases ago, the one she said made her feel put together. Her hair was different, shorter maybe, or just styled in a way I didn't recognize. She walked with purpose, eyes ahead like I wasn't there. Her attorney trailed behind her. A kid. Seriously, he couldn't have been older than 28. Hair perfectly gelled, briefcase probably full of nothing but ego and empty folders. He had that bounce to his step, like he thought being here was exciting, like it was some big trial he could brag about over drinks with other baby sharks later. When he saw me, he actually smiled like we were at a networking event. "Morning," he chirped, and I didn't respond. We filed into the courtroom when they called our names. The judge looked tired. I imagined this was the 8th divorce of the day, and it was barely 11 a.m. I didn't hear half of what was said. The words blurred into a low drone like a fan spinning in my skull. Something about division of assets, legal dissolutions, uncontested terms. I nodded when I was supposed to. She did the same. Her hands were still, so still, folded neatly in her lap like this was a dentist appointment. I couldn't stop fidgeting. My right knee bounced the whole time, and I kept wringing my hands, my palms clammy. And then the moment. The giggle. We were rising to leave, the judge already dismissing us like we were paperwork on his desk, and her attorney turned to me with this glint in his eye like he couldn't help himself, like he'd been waiting for it. "Enjoy your new existence," he said, grinning. "You'll need a miracle." It hit me like a punch, not even the words themselves, but the laughter. The way he chuckled as if it were a punchline to a private joke he shared with her. I looked at her, expecting hopping for a wince, a flash of shame, even just a side-eye. Nothing. She was already turning away, already moving on, already gone. And just like that, it was over. No bang, no breakdown, just an empty room and an ache that settled somewhere in the back of my throat. I walked out into the cold, blinking against the sharp gray light. The sky was the same flat sheet of nothing it had been when I arrived. People passed me on the courthouse steps, talking, laughing, living. I stood there, frozen, manila envelope tucked under my arm like a death certificate. I wanted someone to stop and ask me if I was okay. I wanted someone to see me. But no one did, because this is how it goes. When a heart breaks in public, it doesn't make a sound. I sat in my car for almost an hour before starting it. Just sat there with the heat turned up, staring at the steering wheel, feeling like a ghost watching the ruins of his own life. You think the breaking point is some dramatic collapse, a scream, a slammed door, a confession. But it's quieter than that. It's the moment you realize the person you gave years of your life to looks right through you like your air. It's the sound of a stranger's laugh echoing down a courthouse hallway as he wipes the slate of your marriage clean with a smirk. It's the weight in your chest when you realize you don't have to imagine a future without them because you're already in it. Alone, awake, and still breathing. The first night back in the apartment, no, not back into, it wasn't home, it was a place with beige walls and the stink of someone else's past still soaked into the carpet. I didn't even turn on the lights. I walked in, dropped the envelope on the floor like it was full of disease, and just stood there. The silence was thick, not peaceful, a kind of buzzing emptiness. I could hear the downstairs washing machines thumping in rhythm, someone's laundry being cleaned while my entire life was unraveling one invisible thread at a time. I hadn't brought much, a few boxes, clothes, a half-filled bottle of bourbon, my laptop, some books I hadn't opened since college. The rest stayed in the house with her. I didn't want the furniture, I didn't want the bed. I couldn't picture myself sleeping in the same sheets where she used to rest her head, where we used to pretend we were fine. So I bought an air mattress. The cheap kind that slowly deflates overnight so you wake up sinking lower and lower every morning without realizing it. I lived like that for weeks. I didn't tell my friends right away. I couldn't bear their voices, the well-meaning pity, the offers of beers and bro talk. I needed the silence as much as I hated it. There was something sacred in sitting alone with the pain, even if it scared the hell out of me. Like if I kept turning away from it, I'd miss the point of all this breaking. Mornings were the worst. I'd wake up in that half-collapsed bed, bones sore, the walls too close, light spilling through cheap blinds like judgment. The first few seconds were blank, and then the remembering would crash in. She's gone, she left, it's over. I'd make coffee not because I wanted it, but because that's what people do. The smell made the place feel less like a cell. I didn't have a kitchen table, so I'd drink it sitting on the floor back against the wall, watching the steam curl up and disappear. I started walking a lot. Aimless mostly. I'd go for hours, hands in my coat pockets, eyes on the ground. I told myself it was exercise, but really I think I was looking for something, some lost version of myself maybe, or some corner of the world where it didn't hurt so much to breathe. I'd end up in places I didn't mean to go, quiet neighborhoods, old parks, one time a cemetery that stopped me in my tracks. I stood there looking at rows of stones, names and dates etched in cold granite, and I felt this sudden rush of envy. At least they don't feel this anymore. It was a terrible thought, I know that, but it was honest. Most nights I didn't cook. There was a 24-hour diner 2 blocks down, and the waitresses didn't ask questions. They knew my order by the second week: black coffee, fries, sometimes eggs if I could stomach them. I'd sit in a booth, watching the lights of passing cars stutter across the windows, and I'd write, not anything good, just fragments, memories, questions. Once I wrote, what if she was never mine, just renting space in my life until something better came along. I underlined it so hard the pen tore the page. There was one night, around 2 a.m., I came back from a walk and saw my reflection in the glass door to the building. I didn't recognize myself. My face looked hollow, tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. There was stubble on my jaw that I hadn't bothered to shave. My coat was wrinkled. I looked like someone who had been forgotten, and worse, someone who had started to forget himself. I stood there a long time, staring at that reflection, wondering if this was it, if this was who I'd become now. Then there was Claire. She lived down the hall in 2B. We met over a hammer. I was trying to hang a picture and couldn't find mine. Maybe I hadn't even packed it. She knocked one night, said she heard me cursing through the wall, and offered hers with a tired smile. "I've been through it," she said, not explaining what it was because she didn't need to. She saw me. She knew. She didn't ask for details. She just handed me a hammer like it was medicine and walked back to her apartment. She was quiet, kind, mid-40s maybe, used to be a photographer before the world kicked her in the teeth, her words. Sometimes we'd share silence in the hallway or a cigarette on the fire escape. She had a laugh that didn't match her eyes. One night she slid a paperback under my door, The Myth of Sisyphus. "Saved my life once," the note said, scrawled in quick, slanted handwriting. "Might not do the same for you, but what the hell." I read it cover to cover, didn't understand half of it. But something in those pages, the absurdity, the idea of pushing the boulder up the hill just to keep doing it again and again, it made me feel less crazy. Like maybe the point wasn't getting anywhere. Maybe the point was choosing to keep walking even when the road disappears. But there was still her. Everywhere. In smells, in songs, in stupid little things like the way I still hesitated before brushing my teeth because she used to stand beside me, spitting toothpaste and humming whatever song was stuck in her head. I hated how automatic the remembering was, how even in my solitude she had space. She took up so much space, and I was the one trying to fit into the corners. Some days I wanted to text her. Not to win her back, that illusion had been burned out of me, but just to say, "Do you feel it too?" The hollow, the ache, but I didn't. I knew silence was the only dignity I had left. And maybe that was part of the fallout too, learning how to sit in the silence without filling it, letting it shape me instead of burying me. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift. A tiny rebellion. A plant on the windowsill, a clean set of sheets, a shelf I actually installed. I started answering emails again. I called my sister back. I listened to music, not our music, new music, songs that didn't remind me of her. I let the light in, one window at a time. It wasn't healing, not yet. But it was something like breathing again. I didn't think I'd see her again, not like that. Not in the real world where she was no longer a ghost or a half-formed thought pressed into the margins of my days. But one Tuesday, rainy, unremarkable, a nothing kind of day that should have stayed nothing, I saw her. It was the hardware store on 9th and Grant. I'd gone in for light bulbs, just light bulbs. The hallway in my building had burned out 2 days prior, and I kept bumping into my own thoughts in the dark. I remember wiping sleep from my eyes and thinking, this is adulthood, replacing bulbs when everything else is falling apart. I almost didn't go. I almost just let the dark win. She was there with a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a camel coat with no wrinkles, like he didn't know what it meant to fall asleep in your clothes. His hair was slicked back, deliberate. He had the kind of calm smile that told you he'd never raised his voice out of desperation. She was laughing, not a chuckle, not polite, really laughing, her mouth open wide, head tilted back the way she used to when we were still new, when I was still someone who could make her sound like that. They were standing near the checkout, and I was in aisle 4, frozen, holding a pack of light bulbs like they were the last thing keeping my body tethered to the earth. My knees went soft. I felt cold, like someone had opened a door to a place I'd worked so hard to wall off. And then she saw me. She blinked. Just that one blink, enough to say I see you, not enough to say I remember you. I gave a nod, not out of kindness, out of reflex, out of some deeply ingrained politeness I'd never learned to unlearn. She didn't smile. She didn't look away either, just a flicker of recognition and then gone. She turned back to him and resumed laughing. I left without buying the bulbs. That night I sat on the floor of my apartment, the same air mattress still half deflated beneath me. The painting Claire had helped me hang crooked above it, and I let myself unravel. Not dramatically. Not with screaming or sobbing or smashing things. I didn't even cry. That's the part that scared me. I just sat there in the dark with the realization that she was real and happy and elsewhere. That her laugh had found new life in someone else's world, while mine was still trapped inside the four walls of a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. I wanted to hate her. God, I wanted to, but the truth was simpler. I missed her. Not the version I left, but the one I met, the one who danced barefoot in the kitchen and drew constellations on my arm with her finger, whispering the stories behind each star. That version was long gone, maybe never real, maybe just a trick of memory. But I missed her the way you miss air when you're underwater. I got up, turned the light on, and walked to the bathroom, looked in the mirror, really looked. I expected to see wreckage. I didn't. What I saw was someone hollowed out, yes, but not ruined, not completely. My eyes were tired, but they were mine. My beard was overgrown. My shirt had a stain on it I couldn't place, but I was standing. That counted. That had to count for something. And in that moment, something cracked, not in the way that things break, but in the way a window finally opens after months of being painted shut. I whispered it. Not to her, not to the version of her in my head, to myself. I forgive you. My voice shook, not because I didn't mean it, but because I did. I forgave myself for holding on too long, for not knowing when to let go, for shrinking to fit the shape of someone else's absence, for blaming myself for a breaking that took two people to cause and one person to finish. And just like that, the silence inside me shifted, not disappeared, just softened. Like it could maybe become a kind of peace someday. I picked the bulbs up off the floor, the ones I'd brought home from some trip months ago and forgotten under the kitchen sink. I twisted one into the socket in the hallway. Light bloomed, warm, imperfect, flickering slightly. But light. Still light, it didn't get better all at once. There was no moment where the sky parted or the air suddenly filled with birdsong and meaning. The light bulb I installed that night flickered out again 2 weeks later, and I left it like that for another month. But something had shifted, however quietly. A turning of the soil, a hush after the storm. I started waking up without the dread. Not joy, no, not yet, but absence. The absence of grief as the first feeling in the morning. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling like always, but instead of rehearsing all the ways I had failed, all the things I should have said or done differently, I'd just breathe, I'd stretch, sometimes I'd even make eggs. The apartment didn't feel like a storage unit anymore. I began unpacking things I'd left in boxes out of laziness or fear or the stubborn belief I didn't deserve a life that looked put together. I found a sweater she'd given me once, still folded with her laundry scent faint in the fibers. I held it for a minute, then placed it in a donation bag without ceremony. No rage, no tears, just done. That's how it started, little acts of moving forward, like lighting a match in a dark room, not to burn anything down, just to see. I framed a photo Claire had taken of the city's skyline from our roof during the first snow. It hung crookedly like everything in this place, but I loved it. Something about the way the city looked half asleep and full of ache matched how I felt inside. We didn't talk much after that winter. She moved out one morning in April, left a single sticky note on my door. It gets weirdly beautiful, doesn't it? I read it 3 times before sticking it to my fridge. It's still there. Her handwriting is starting to fade. I started painting, not well, but with hunger. Color poured out of me like it had been waiting for permission. Big abstract pieces, lots of reds and oranges at first, anger probably. Then I started adding blue, green, I even used pink once, surprised at how soft it felt, how unapologetically gentle. I stacked the canvases against the wall. I didn't show them to anyone. They weren't for that. They were a conversation between me and the part of me that had survived. I don't think about her every day anymore. Sometimes I go a whole week without remembering the sound of her laugh. Other times I'll hear a song or see a shadow that resembles her shape, and something in me will tighten before letting go. Grief is like that. It stops being a knife and becomes a bruise. Tender, yes, but survivable. One Sunday I passed the courthouse. It was almost sunny. The steps were empty. For the first time I didn't flinch. I stood across the street with my hands in my pockets and thought about how strange it is, the way a building can hold the worst day of your life and still just be brick and windows. It didn't own me anymore. Nothing did. I've started saying yes to things again. A weekend hike, a drink with a coworker, a bookstore I've walked past for months but never entered. I say yes to the quiet things. The small joys. I still come home alone, and most nights I still eat dinner at the counter while the laundry churns below me. But I set the table now. I light a candle sometimes. I keep the dishes clean. The basil plant on my windowsill finally sprouted. Not much, just a few bright green leaves, reaching for whatever sun finds its way into this place. But it's enough, God, it's enough. The miracle wasn't that she came back. The miracle was that I stayed. That I didn't vanish. That I chose to begin again quietly. And I'm still beginning, every day, every day, every day. Still planting. Still pushing the boulder. Still here, still here, still here, still here.